Welcome to the True Commercial Real Estate Podcast, your ultimate investor resource for all things truly commercial. Whether you're interested in industrial, retail, medical office, storage, single tenant, or any other type of non-residential real estate investment, this is your podcast.
Okay, so welcome, Justin. It's good to have you. A word about Justin Smith, SIOR, and he's also Senior VP at Lee and Associates. Justin has experience representing tenants from small local startups to private family-owned companies to large public international corporations. He has successfully completed over 500 assignments nationally, representing roughly $500 million worth of consideration and 7,500,000 square feet. He is the author of the book Industrial Intelligence and the host of Industrial Insights podcast. So really happy to have you, Justin. So we'll get going right away. First question, can you tell us your backstory and how it's led you to where you are today?
Yeah, I'm happy to. Yeah, and for me, I'm in Southern California in Irvine, in Orange County, just an hour south of Los Angeles. And I work for Lee and Associates, and I started here right out of undergraduate. So I'm 40. I started when I was 22, somewhere around there. And so I've been here about 18 years, same firm, same market. And then for me, growing up in the market was in the south part of Orange County. And as I became more experienced, I kept looking for larger markets to work. And I kept hearing about Prologis and big landlords working in areas and investors buying property, and it was never in my market. So I was like, well, I'm going to have to slowly start working towards their market. And that led me to work throughout all of Orange County. And a couple years later, I went to grad school at USC, and I did my MBA and my master's in real estate development, which is in downtown LA. So when I thought I was working just the Orange County market, I ended up learning the LA market, because if you wanted to make it to school without spending half your life in traffic, you would have to come up with a plan. So my plan was drive up to LA in the morning after rush hour, and then walk the block passing out flyers and business cards and taking meetings until it was time to make it to school. And so that was pretty cool. That turned into learning a new area. And once I got out of college, I went at night. So I didn't stop brokerage, and brokerage helped pay for school. Nice. And then since then, I've done and learned the Inland Empire and worked on a dozen or so deals there. And that encompasses the greater LA basin. So the other, if you think Southern California, that's LA, Orange County, Riverside, and San Bernardino counties, which collectively are called the Inland Empire. And then San Diego is our brother to the south, where a lot of people have a presence down there, but you generally work San Diego or you work the LA basin. And so since then, I've continued to expand markets. I've been fortunate to get a couple clients that have signed me up to work on their tenant rep assignments across the country. And so that's given me experience throughout a dozen different states in the Midwest, in the South, and the East Coast. And it's been fun to learn other markets, because everyone has its own dynamic marketplace. So It's been great to learn what's going on in Charlotte or in San Antonio or in Austin or in Tampa Bay or anywhere else. And so that's given me an extra perspective and lens and breadth of experience to draw upon and build on. And then over this past maybe 3 or 4 years, I've had a couple assignments that have taken me further down the capital markets, where I've worked on investment sales of fully leased properties or fully leased portfolios, and worked with more institutional landlords. So it's been great in our industrial business to be able to grow on the tenant side and to be able to grow on the landlord and investor side. And then maybe in the past 10 years, I've started investing in property. And I started small with single families in Austin, Texas. I scaled up to buying a small triplex, like a small apartment around here. And then I started buying multi-tenant industrial in Texas and Dallas, and in a couple cities that are close by. And that leads me to where I am today to think, okay, great. We've been able to build on our experience. We've been able to invest in what we know best. And now what? And so that was enough to get me interested in writing a book. And that was its own unique experience.
Yeah, talking about that, what led you, what was the impulse to write a book for you, Justin?
We brokers generally don't go to grad school, and we definitely don't write books most of the time. So, so far, I'm not trying to buck the trend, but that's just been where my interest has been. And it was primarily a strategic coach that gave me the idea, but it was only in finding Scribe Media and Tucker Max's book writing, coaching, and publishing company that gave me the confidence and the framework to actually think, I've got the idea in my brain, but how do I breathe life into it? I don't know how. I'd love a partner in there, but I don't want a partner that I'm not sure if I'm going to trust them and learning, how to figure that part out. So strategic coach had a bunch of people that had already walked that path, and there was a trust built up there where it was very easy to be introduced to them. And then they can help you depending on your appetite for writing, editing, and publishing. They can help you with the part of that, 2 parts of that, or all of the parts of that. And so that was that. Then between having enough experience, getting the idea, and then having a group that I felt really good about, that gave me enough confidence to say, I'm going to put it out there. And then that was its own tough experience of okay, I think it's done. I hope it's good enough. And, let's release it out into the world and, see what the feedback is, see how people receive it, and see if it's helpful for anybody or if it's not, or, if I wrote stuff that was wrong, or that how well did I actually know the business? So it was quite an interesting experience.
How has it been so far? I'm going to throw a little question in there. How's it been so far? How's the book been received? What's your feedback so far?
Yeah, so far so good. Yeah, it's interesting. It's something where who reads this? Who's interested in industrial buildings, much less how executives go about finding warehouses? That's a pretty small market of people. But the way I generally looked at it is, if I had a resource that I could give to a client and that helped them know what they were doing, helped their team know what they were doing, and that gave us the ability to work together better and to grow our relationship, and I sold 0 copies, that was a win in my book. And so awesome. I feel like that, I didn't think of it as a low bar to set, but, selling books isn't what I was in it for, which is odd, to write a book that you then sell. But it turns out just the experience of writing it and putting it out there, and what you gain along the way and who you meet along the way, was already worth it. And so it was a surprisingly fruitful endeavor that I would recommend to people, but I practice trying not to tell people what to do. But if someone had that idea and told me that was something they were looking at, it's very liberating to be able to understand what that looks like, and to be able to help people with it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that resonates with Logan, who's writing his own book.
For sure. Yeah. Yeah, I'm in the process of writing one as well, so I definitely am interested. I'll have to shoot you a message outside of here and just get your advice on a few things if you don't mind. Yeah, so
happy to. And you had another author on your podcast with Tyler Cobble. I think he put his out there, and yeah, it's I'd be happy to help anything I can do.
That'd be great. Yeah. I'm relatively early in the process, so I've gathered 5 or 6. So the book is, and not to steal the thunder here, the book's going to be called 10 Deals, and it's going to just basically outline 10 industrial investment deals from various different investors, just spelling out from start to finish. So I've got about 5 or 6 of the investors so far, and still looking for a few more, but very new in the process. And I'd be interested to get your advice on the whole process. So
I love it. It's you have to live an interesting life to write an interesting book. So I'm sure working on deals like that, and then there's plenty of lessons along the way that you can share that can help people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very cool.
Yeah, and
Very
you
cool.
mentioned strategic coach, and right before this interview, we were talking during the mastermind. Someone was talking about how they were looking for a mentor, a coach. Could you tell us about the support you received and the benefits you got out of the strategic coach with a 10-11?
Yeah, coaching is like there are many different kinds, and there's many different people and companies. And so I was with Strategic Coach for a little while, and I left. And I left because I didn't quite get it. What I thought I was going to get was someone that was going to learn about me and my business, and then they would know me and my business better than me and help direct me down the right path more often, right? And save me some headache and some heartache. And what I found there was it wasn't about someone knowing commercial real estate brokerage better than me or learning like me and my experience better than me. Strategic coach, when I came back, I finally got it. And now I couldn't be happier. And it was all about like giving you different frameworks and thinking tools that could help you tackle your own challenges as an entrepreneur. So by nature of entrepreneur, there's people that own big businesses, small businesses. There's people that are brokers. There are people that are in real estate, but not related to brokerage, like a pure investors. There's doctors, there's healthcare investors. There's all sorts of people that are not related, but they all have a lot of unique challenges with teamwork or with technology or with dealing with how you present and package yourself or how you work your back office operations, your processes, like, and trying to collaborate rather than compete for business. So all of those things, I didn't get it. And it had to have me go in and have a tough time understanding and pop out of there and try coaches that were just real estate coaches to finally understand if I go back there, I know what I'm going to get. And is that what I need? Is that helpful for me? And I feel like it finally resonated of what they had to offer with what I thought that I needed. And so now I couldn't be happier. I would recommend them at a heartbeat. And it's just been a fresh perspective, like being with the group and being with the organization and just trying to figure out how to continue to learn and grow.
Thank you. And what's interesting about your book as well is that it's from the perspective of the tenant, and it leads me into my next question. Is there a typical tenant size you work with in terms of square foot needs and number of employees?
In general, it's as big as possible, right? Just like everybody would like to think of the opportunities that they go after. And so I began working small multi-tenant projects where there were 1, 2, and 5,000 foot tenants. And then over the years with experience, I've been able to find larger opportunities. And so the largest I've worked on is probably 200,000 feet. And if I thought of like what is a middle sized project would probably be like 50,000 feet. And that would be like an average size. And in Southern California and across the country, like we have a lot of very big buildings and we have a lot of distribution centers and fulfillment centers that are in several 100,000 feet. And so I have found there's always a middle ground where you fly under the radar of big corporate companies that have big corporate representation agreements and master service agreements. And so now in industrial, I would say 50,000 feet would be like a good, like average size or middle ground for assignments. And a number of employees is totally like independent of size, because some may have 1 person in the office and 10 in the warehouse, and some may have a laboratory with 300 people in the warehouse. And so when I look at who I'm looking to work with, oftentimes it's more has to do with when their lease is expiring. That would be a typical like tenant rep thing that people would look at. But often now it's just looking by square footage size and kind of just starting there.
So as you've grown, I imagine you've got other people on your team where if somebody calls for the 10,000 square foot, you're passing that off to somebody else at this point. You're focusing on the larger
Yeah, I
transactions.
came in with a team and
Yeah.
then I grew to be on my own.
Hmm.
And then I was on my own for a long time and would just partner with people as needed in
Hmm.
different markets or based on different assignments. And
Hmm.
then only recently, and a lot of thanks again to Strategic Coach, I started like finally getting out of my own way of having to work on my own to make sure that I made 100% of what I earned, and
Yeah.
starting to think of what's my own unique ability to contribute and how can I build with other people's talents and find people who have their own unique abilities and maximize that as a team. And so I'm very thankful that now I can trust in the team and I can feel good about sharing and good about like who does what, where, when, and why. And so it all depends on which assignment, on who works on what. But I feel like teamwork never ends, and which part of the team is working on what, like that evolves too as everyone gets more experience and has their own interests and what they want to work on.
Yeah. That's awesome. Very cool. So I want to switch gears a little bit. It's still kind of tenant focused, but kind of more on the investing side. So a lot of our followers, they're kind of across the board. We've got some who have been, syndicators for medical office. We've got some who have done 100 retail deals, but a lot of them are either just starting commercial with a couple deals under their belt, or they're in residential trying to transition into commercial. And I think one of the biggest things that people, the question marks they have are surrounding, the process of leasing that out. So different from a traditional residential where you're going to put it on Zillow or you're going to put it on, Craigslist or apartments.com, and you're going to get 7 people that call you and it's leased within a week. Like it's so different from that. So can you walk us through the typical process that, from the landlord side, I guess, and from the tenant side, of what it takes to get a commercial space leased up?
Happy to, yeah. So I would contemplate like a beginner investment would be either like a small single freestanding building that's 5,000 feet, or would be a small multi-tenant industrial property where there's a couple of small tenants in there. And so when you think about leasing, who is usually in those spaces are small, local, service-based businesses. So they could be a plumber, a contractor, an electrical contractor on the construction side of things. They could sell parts to other larger distributors. So think like auto parts or aerospace parts. They could be small manufacturers that build things with wood or with metal. Or they just have some kind of storage, and they could store pallets or store product for hair products is one I'm working with recently.
Cool.
But I think in all of these properties, you have in industrial, you have an office component and a warehouse component. And so the office component is what needs the most work. But in small investments, usually you have minimal office. And minimal office could be 1,000 feet. And 1,000 feet of office is a reception, 1, 2, or 3 offices, maybe a kitchenette or break room, maybe a conference room. And so those things need, if you just look from top to bottom, you got the T-bar ceiling grid above you and the lights. You got the walls that need paint. You need the floors that need carpet, vinyl tile or luxury vinyl tile, and then a rubber floorboard around the edge, or like a strip. And then you got a bathroom, right? And bathrooms can be notoriously expensive when you think of, is it ADA accessible? Can you get a wheelchair in there? Do you need to get a wheelchair in there? Does the city need you to get a wheelchair? When was it updated last? Does it comply? Does it not? And do you have to make it comply if it does not already? But the warehouse space needs to be broom swept. It needs to have electricity that works for people. So the electricity is for machines. It could be for forklifts. Some warehouses will have sprinkler systems. The nicer, the bigger, and the more modern will have them. Some older buildings built in the 70s and 80s generally will not. And so if your warehouse, people aren't stacking taller than 12 feet, and in these small buildings, usually your ceiling is 12, 14, or 16 feet tall, maybe 18, then you will not need sprinklers in most cases. And it's only as you go up in size where sprinklers become more important and a more like integral part of leasing. So for small companies, they need to know the office is in a shape, a size, and condition that works for them, that the warehouse works for them and has sprinklers or power. And then access to the warehouse is either by a grade level door, which means a roll-up door where you can just walk right in, or you could drive a truck in, or a dock high door, which is a truck well. It's like a slanted driveway that makes it so that a big rig can back up to it. And once the big rig has opened up the container or the trailer, the bottom of the container is flat with the floor of the warehouse, so that a forklift could drive in, pick up a pallet of product, back out, and then move it and store it somewhere in the building. And so those are just the super basic components. All of those need to be clean and functional. But fortunately, painting and doing flooring, right, is a very modest expense. Everyone knows from investing in houses. Working on bathrooms, you know, from investing in houses. And then anything in the warehouse, there's very little that you need to do because most already have the electricity or the sprinklers. So on occasion, you may need to replace a roll-up door for a couple $1,000, or some of the dock equipment, which are just bumpers or levelers that are on the dock, which could be a couple $1,000. But otherwise, that's in general, that's what you need to spend to turn an old unit and get it rent ready for a new tenant. And then these small service-based businesses that are then going to become your tenant, generally look for 1 to 3 year leases. On occasion, you'll get 3 to 5 year leases, and they won't have much in the way of financials. They'll have something, but you know, I generally have found my comfort level is to ask for 2 months of deposit from everybody. And so if I get a good feeling after looking them in the eye over a Zoom call or even a phone call now, and I ask them a couple questions based on the answers, if I get a good feeling about it, I'll get a double security deposit. And in general, that's what you're going to rely upon if someone's business is closed, or if it goes and it's not successful for one reason or another, and they leave the place a mess, and you need to fix that mess and get it rent ready and get a new tenant in there. That's kind of your best bet. Knowing that may not be enough, but the majority of people don't trash the place and don't go out of business. So if you get that from enough people, you generally will be able to protect yourself and then move on. And so these tenants often, even though if they sign up for 1 to 3 year leases initially, I would say an average time that a tenant spends in a property that's industrial, in a small space, in a small multi-tenant industrial building, is probably like 8 to 10 years. So they'll renew for 1, 2, or 3 years at a time and renew again. And you'll have ones that stay less and ones that stay more. But in general, people need their business to be successful. And if they run a service-based business, their clients are local, so they want to make it easy for their clients, their customers, and their employees. So usually you don't have a reason to want to move and leave because you live close by, your employees close by, and the customers that you service are generally close by. So that oftentimes will create people wanting to stay. And moving also isn't fun either, right? With not only disruption, the people who will move aren't working while they're moving, right? Your team. And then you need to send drivers to different places. You need to update all your information with your banks and your customers and your insurance. And generally, people don't want to move. So the rule of thumb is people don't move to the same size down the street. You move if it's smaller or if it's larger, or if you've got some huge problem with your landlord, but most of the time you don't have a huge problem with your landlord doesn't want to give you any problems. They want to be your partner. So I've found tenants usually stick around for quite some time. And with small multi-tenant parks, sometimes they'll lease a second unit or a third unit. It can have its own kind of spaces that tenants can grow within so that they don't have to move. And it's pretty cool to be able to accommodate people that are growing and have them grow with you. And that's the perfect world if we're all growing together.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. That's awesome. So that's a great synopsis of like how, an entire park and what people are going to need to look for what tenants are going to need. Can you talk a little bit about, okay, we've gone through this, we've bought this facility, we've cleaned it up, it's ready for a tenant now. What's that process look like from the point of this is vacant to I get a tenant, showings and contracts, and what's that whole process look like?
Yeah, for the small investor, which I would count myself one of these guys, you want to fight vacancy like the plague. So I generally will take people's temperature as often as possible to know what they're feeling, what their plans are. Old school thinking is don't ask, don't tell. Stick a renewal in front of them a week out, they can't move and they're forced to stay. And so I generally don't do that because not only is that not fun for them, but when they do need to move, you can't protect yourself either. And so what I generally will do is reach out early and often to work on renewals. And therefore, when people don't renew, I know about it a few months in advance. And then I start trying to lease it whenever they're ready that they know they cannot renew. And so in most instances, that's 30 to 60 days, sometimes 90. And so that means showing it is working with them in a way that's good for us both. So oftentimes what I have found does not disturb the tenant any more than is absolutely necessary is I will pick a day, Friday at 10, and I'll say, is it okay if anyone who needs to tour shows up Friday at 10? And then they'll show up with or without their agent, and I'll let them know it's occupied. And then usually you get someone flakes, someone shows up, and maybe two people show up. And that's not a disruption. If someone flakes, that's okay. You haven't put someone out to make a showing that didn't, that canceled on you.
Sure.
And what I have also started to do is do these Matterport 3D walkthrough virtual tours where you get a floor plan and a walkthrough. And so sometimes I'll just do that now, and then only people will tour if they absolutely have to. And after they've already seen the virtual tour that costs $100 or $200, you could do it yourself if you want to on your cell phone, or you can invest in the Matterport 3D camera. And then perfect world, and 9 times out of 10, you can get a lease signed before the last tenant moved out. And then you may have some time where you need to still go through and do your paint and carpet, clean the place up. And so that time in between where you're actually down could be a week.
Yeah.
And so a week's pretty cool if that can happen. Some tenants say, gosh, there's 3 or 4 groups who want it. I'm the group that wants it. I'll do my own paint and flooring. And you can have it on the first and do your own paint and flooring, and that'll save me the time. Or I'll give you 1 or 2 weeks free that I would have spent anyways, and I save the time, and they get to use their crew and do it for cheaper and get it how they want it. That can sometimes be another way for it to be a win-win for people. And God forbid none of that works. Your tenant moves out, your building's empty, then what do? I would still have that virtual tour, right? And so people only get to see it in person once they've passed that test and feel very good about leasing it. And then it would depend if I'm local, right? Do I show it? Or if I have a property manager, do I have a property manager show it for me? I do my own leasing at present. So I generally will have my property manager help. And then I'll stick with the Friday at 10 o'clock time. So even if we have to spend her time and someone flakes or doesn't show, or two groups show, she's got one day and time to be there. And that's gets you where you need to go without wasting people's time or like putting anyone else out.
I love that.
I don't
That's
think
awesome.
most people do that way, but that's how I've come to learn to do it.
Yeah, no, I love those tests, those check marks. Pass this, look at this virtual tour, because a lot of people probably do. You don't want to spend time showing it to somebody that sees it for the first time and says, "Oh, this isn't what I thought about." And that's so great that, because I've seen those, and you've got a 3D tour. You can just walk through the whole facility. You've got a floor plan, so if you've got machinery or if you got anything you need to put in there, you get that in advance, and that's great. That's a great way to do it. And I love the one day, one time to just, especially for your property manager. I'm sure they love that as well. They can coordinate their time a lot better. So that's
now,
awesome.
when the market's soft, I'm begging them to come tour anytime they want to, and I'll be there, right? But just in general, that has not, like there has for the last 5 years, there's been plenty. And I've gone through one slow market in 08, 09, not where I had owned these, but where I was a leasing broker. And so I am cognizant that that's we are able to do that now, but that may not always be the case. But I think that virtual tour still can help out. Yeah,
that's awesome. And I know from tenant to tenant, this can vary widely, but can you give us some insights on what are some common things that you see, that tenants want? That's it can be for this specific space, or it can be as broad as you want. But what are some typical areas that tenants are going to say, these are my must-haves for a space?
Yeah, there's so little in the smallest of the small. So if you want to get sparky with it and make your space a little more special, you would do luxury vinyl tile, which is like wood plank vinyl planks that just gives you like a nicer look. Once you start getting into bigger spaces, 10,000, 50,000, 100,000, then that everything changes somewhat. Sure. Because you have larger companies that have branding and that are thinking about like amenities and are thinking about culture a little bit more, where they are trying to create a vibe within their space, where in the smaller space, that's not so much. So if you were thinking larger space of what people may want, that could be exposed ceilings. We'll call it creative office. And so exposed ceilings means more space, there's more volume, it feels better. Glass, like glass sliding doors, glass partitions, glass conference room walls, glass office walls, anything that's natural light related. And then polished concrete instead of carpet, instead of vinyl tile or luxury vinyl tile, and polishing out concrete, which is more expensive than doing any other kind of carpeting or flooring. And then otherwise, some people are starting to do, instead of you used to have a break room in its own little area that was cold and dark and not special. And same for your copy room, right? So now we don't have those, right? So you have like a kitchenette that's open, or you have a cafe where it's open to the bullpen area, or it's just off to the side where it has some privacy or noise reduction. But generally, like you can turn that into a collaboration space that's set up where like you don't mind spending time there. You can gather there. And so all those, as you start to get into bigger spaces, that becomes more important. And then with bigger spaces comes the need for dock high loading. And then with even bigger spaces, the quantity of dock high loading. And then even bigger spaces is trailer storage in the yard, where people can bring in a shipment from the port or from the rail, and then they can drop it off, and the truck can leave, the trailer stays while it's unloaded, and then the trailer is parked in the yard until the truck driver's back and picks it up, whether it's full or empty, and takes it to its next place. So those are some ways it changes as you go up the scale.
Yeah. And it's such a wide variety. So I think, what I'm getting is kind of know your product, right? Know what building you're buying and what type of client's going to be in there. because it could change drastically on what they need. No, that's awesome. Those are fantastic insights. So when it comes to signing a new tenant, and I'm sure this will change across the scale as well, but what do you see as the biggest negotiating points when it's a new potential tenant, both for the small and maybe for the large? If you can kind of give us a little dichotomy there of those two.
Yeah, today's general vibe is you'll get whatever you're fortunate to get your hands on, and you'll like it, is the vibe. And so it's not good for tenants, right? It's there's very few that are available. What few are available are expensive. The few that are expensive have a lot of people who want them, and you have to go through a beauty pageant to say, I am better than the other ones because of track record or credit or term or lack of need for tenant improvements. Please pick me, I'll do anything. And so it's not like that in all sizes everywhere, but that's the general sentiment these days. And it's not like that everywhere, right? So if you go to a city that has 100,000 people, that's far from a big area, right? You'll have a slower market, and it will be lower velocity, and you'll have more leverage. If you're in the middle of the biggest market in the country, and there's a ton, and you're by the port, and it's crazy, then you get nothing unless you get lucky. So it's interesting to think through what can you do. So you can be mindful of who your partner is, who the landlord is, or the developer. You can think through a term. Longer is generally better. And it's funny because you used to always say longer was better, but now your rental rate is fixed for year one, and it increases 3 to 4% a year. Right now, the market is going up 5 to 10% per year. So landlords are almost like, I'll do 5, but I won't do 10, because in year 6 through 10, you're in the money, not me. And ordinarily, landlords would say, I don't want to be vacant in year 6. So I'll sign 10 years, and I'm thankful to have you for 10 years because that protects my downside. So what we knew and could rely on is turned upside down a little bit. And so now credit is huge, of like, how do you demonstrate your credit worthiness to landlords? And what I'm finding is if you are nobody from nowhere and you've got no track record, but you've got a great idea and a bunch of money from your investors or your bank, it's a real challenge. Even if you're credible and you've left General Electric and you're a summa cum laude from Harvard and you got $1 million in the bank, and you go to a landlord and say, ordinarily, I'm a very good bet, right? And the landlord will say, I appreciate that, but if you give me all of that $1 million for security deposit, maybe I'll give you a chance. And you're like, wait a second, hold on. I was going to use that $1 million for employees, for equipment, for product, to pay rent, and to take care of my burn rate. And so that means it's costing more upfront for people to get into leases because they're having to put up a larger security deposit in order to win. And not always, but sometimes, and in the larger spaces when you have less than big corporate credit. And so something I got wrong in my book that I learned from is that a lot of developers prefer letters of credit from the bank on big deals rather than cash in the form of a security deposit. And what I've come to learn is for these bigger deals, if you are a new group and you go bankrupt, you have a demand you can make from the bank in order to get your money from the letter of credit. But if you have money in your pocket as a security deposit, is the judge going to take that from you to pay other creditors with, rather than you being able to protect your own downside? And so I'm still learning about that, but that was something that by putting out what I thought I knew, I come to find there are many ways of doing that. And that was a new one that I learned along the way.
Very cool.
That I have now put out to the street and tried, and is true. Yeah.
That's awesome. That's awesome. yeah, so basically, I mean, it's going to vary, but right now it's very much, if we look at a normal market from a purchasing standpoint, you have the buyers and sellers market. You also have the tenant landlord market. It's very much in favor of the landlords at this point, is what you're saying.
Yeah,
Yeah,
correct.
yeah, and I agree.
And
We're seeing. Sorry, go ahead.
Just being a buyer is just as difficult. You're 1 to
Yep.
20 bidding on the same building, and you need a track record, and you need a strategy and tactics to try and get to the front. And it can be done, but it just is. It's an interesting challenge today.
It is. It is. Yeah, that's fantastic. That's all great stuff. I mean, you had mentioned that you do have some commercial real estate and some industrial real estate. As far as your next investments you're looking to do you have a specific criteria of what you're looking for next?
Yeah, I would say multi-tenant industrial that's 30 to 100,000 feet. And so
Okay.
it could be one building, it could be a park with multiple buildings, but in general, it would have small tenants that are 1, 2, or 5, maybe 10,000 feet tops. And concrete tilt-up construction. So that means all 4 walls are made out of concrete. And when you look across the country, you'll find 60% of every city that has multi-tenant industrial has corrugated metal or Butler metal buildings. And they are not without value. I just have found that a concrete tilt-up, to me, I perceive to be of more value in that it can endure and weather for longer. And I prefer that. So I look for markets where those exist. And then I like anywhere in general that doesn't have snow, where I will deal with snow, but I sure have tried not to, in terms of it being harder on your roof, it being more dangerous for people on their feet and more dangerous for people on their trucks. And then as water flows off your roof, when it melts, then it goes into the building oftentimes, and you end up learning a lot about silicone, epoxies, cracks in your foundation, the joints where the 2 concrete panels come together, and how a drop of water can get in there, and what you can do to try and stop it, divert it, slow it down, or prevent it from being there in the first place. And so I still am dealing with all these problems, which now are just challenges that now at least I have more experience and an ability to be cognizant of. But I try not to add on to that by every year dumping a bunch of snow on the roof if I can help it.
Yeah, I was going to say that sounds like you're talking from experience there. So yeah.
No doubt.
Yeah. Aurelian, you don't get any snow, do you? None up north.
Oh, we get a lot of it, especially in London. We're in between 2 lakes, so we get a lot of snow.
Yeah, I'm sure.
We had our first snow this morning, actually.
Oh, really? Okay, you're already getting it. There you go. There you go. We haven't had any yet in the Charlotte market. So, I mean, it doesn't happen very often, but yeah, haven't had it. So this has been just awesome so far. I think it's a wealth of knowledge that everybody's learned so far. Again, like I said, we have a lot of folks who are new to investing, or, maybe they're just starting out, or maybe they've been in residential, but now they're moving into commercial. Can you give some advice for those people who are just now starting? Maybe they want to get into industrial, maybe they want to get into somewhere else in commercial, but what advice would you have for those people just starting out?
Yeah, my path followed the Monopoly board game. And so I took $100,000 and I followed job growth and population growth in 2011, which took me to Austin, Texas. And then when I got to Austin and saw what $100,000 would buy, I ran north. And that sent me to a beautiful place called Round Rock, Texas, where you can spend $100,000 on a house and feel pretty good about it, or you could back then. And then I bought a triplex, which I moved into with my bride on day one. We move into an apartment building, which generally isn't what your wife would see as like riding off into the sunset. And we lived there until we had kids, when we needed to move out. And we did our first 1031 exchange into a small industrial building. And before that, I tried to syndicate an industrial deal, thinking I'm young, I'm smart, I can find deals. Maybe I can take on this huge responsibility of investing other people's money. And it was interesting. It was a great experience. It taught me what banks need to see to be a partner with you. And it taught me the value of finding another general partner that would have a balance sheet. So even if I thought I was smart, and even if I did find a deal, I needed to also find the balance sheet in order to bring all that together. And so that taught me, do it with my own first. And that's what led me to sell the triplex and just buy a smaller one on my own after a false start trying to syndicate it, which I went to friends and family saying, hey, I'm a syndicator, I can do this. And then I said, oh, that deal didn't work out, and at the time, it's not like that's a fun experience, but now I was able to then take that. And the next year, I knew the brokers in that market from that false start. They didn't shame me for trying. And now that I was doing it with my own money and a 1031 exchange chunk of money, I now had a relationship I could build with. And that got me in the market and got me the lender. And it got me the track record that got me to think I may be able to do this again. And so the last one I bought was with money that was built up in the account from the first one, which is what you all hope and dream for, to have one pay for the next.
Yeah.
And so it was just interesting that I took a gamble and I was willing to walk the path with my own money on something small. And I replicated that a couple of times. Then I tried to grow and it didn't work. And so I took the next chunk of money and I tried a little bit bigger and I replicated that a few times. So I may try and syndicate one of these and we'll see if the second time is the charm, or if I need to start a little smaller. Instead of 10 million, let's start at 5. And then now I know I may need a GP and I feel better sharing and I've learned some teamwork skills along the way. Maybe that can now take that experience and transform it into something where I can build. And so I just try and build, try and learn better teamwork, try and start smaller if it doesn't work until I find a size that it does work, and then do that again until I have the confidence to feel that I can start building a little bit bigger.
That's awesome. I think that last like 3 or 4 minutes, whatever that was, is fantastic. I think that's great advice for anybody starting out. And it's a model that is I think perfect, because you're learning as you go, and you're not, it's not like you're going from a single family house to a $50 million property that, you can't take baby steps. You can't hit a base hit. You have to either strike out or hit a grand slam. There are steps in between. I love that. I think it's fantastic.
So Dan Sullivan, a strategic coach, had a new book come out recently called The Gap, Not the Gain, or The Gain, Not the Gap, right?
Yeah.
And so what I just told, there it is.
Yes.
So my experience is me measuring backwards, right? That's and I can feel good about that. I was able to use my experience and build upon it, where when I thought I was going to syndicate and it didn't work, I had this big problem. I couldn't get where I thought I needed to go. And so that was deflating. And now I feel like that's the framework that can help you think through, like continuing to build with your experience and figuring, what can I now learn about what I've done in the past that can help me build in the future? And it took a long time for that to soak in. And now at least every 90 days, they beat that into my brain, and some of it's starting to get in, and it's starting to help. And so I'm thankful for them starting to put out books like that, so that people that aren't in the program can learn some of those and draw from it.
That's awesome. That's phenomenal. I'm excited. Aurelian's got that. We actually do a book review once a month on one of ours, and he's got his in hard copy, and I've got mine on Audible. I hope it doesn't start here. I accidentally tapped the button. I was going to show you. Anyways, if it starts in the background, I'll turn it off. But no, that's awesome. That's phenomenal. Looking forward to reading that. And I think it's just an awesome strategy. So as far as our listeners and the audience goes, how can they learn more about you? How can they find out more about your book or your podcast, and just, learn a little bit more about you?
Sure. Yeah. We brokers are pretty easy people to reach and to find. So for me, I have smithcore.com is my website, and you'll find everything you need to know there. And then the book is called Industrial Intelligence. It's on Amazon, and it's on audiobook, Kindle, hard paperback. And then Industrial Insights is a podcast that I host. And that came from interviewing people for the book. And so it was so much fun interviewing people for the book that I wanted to keep the good times going. So I said, you know what, this can be its own thing on its own. And so it's been fun to continue to use that as an avenue to learn more. It's like, that's how we meet people these days, right? And that's funny that it is that way, but it is an opportunity too. So I'm enjoying that. And yeah, those are the main ways people can reach me.
That's awesome. Thank you. I think Aurelian's going to jump into our audience questions now.
Yeah, we have quite a few questions from the audience. So Jason, first, how do you get, so you mentioned smaller deals at the beginning. So how do you get financing on these smaller buildings with short-term leases?
It's surprising. I believe in multi-tenant industrial and in leasing. Banks do not look at it like an apartment, right? Where you think apartment financing is easy and everyone has month-to-month to 1-year leases. And so I found there was some educating there. Some lenders have experience there, but you really have to like demonstrate that and educate lenders with that, because I found the majority that is a concern. And so if you can walk through this leasing program that I walked through with you, that's that can oftentimes be enough for them to understand, okay, got it. You've thought about that. You have a strategy for it. Your strategy seems reasonable. I am now going to continue to building confidence in lending you money for that kind of project. But it's a challenge.
Mm-hmm. For sure. Absolutely. All right. I'm sorry. I'm looking at someone said I can see the wheels in Logan's head turning there. That's fun. Yeah. Yeah. This has been informative. I love it. Yeah, like you said in the beginning, industrial are people. That's me. I'm an industrial dude. So I love it. Do you prefer a particular type of lease for larger tenants, triple net, double net, modified gross? What's your preference for lease type?
Yeah, as net as possible, right? So if it could be pure triple net or absolute net where they take care of everything, that would be great. But that generally doesn't happen. And the smaller the space, the smaller the market, the less experienced or sophisticated, the closer you get to gross. And so usually what I have bought have had gross leases, because when you are a small business owner and you need a space, you want to know, what's my monthly net? So just give it to me straight. $1,800 a month, I can do $1,800 a month. And so educating all tenants on what is triple net, why is that different? The apartment I've got or the house I rent isn't like that. I'm not paying your property tax. I have found gross is what's practical. But if you are sophisticated, most leases allow you to reconcile overages for property tax and insurance and maintenance so that you can bill your tenant back in year 2 the amount of increase in your property tax, insurance, and maintenance. And that's a CAM reconciliation. So what is easier to explain, a net lease or CAM reconciliation? They're both difficult to explain, but I found it's easier to just have one time to true up the books than to deal with that all the time. Yeah.
Cool.
And some people don't even do CAM rec. Some just say, I don't know what that is. I don't need to know. And I don't do that. And they just collect rent. And that still works out great. CAM recs aren't I think of them as a 13th rent payment in 12 months is that's of the size and scope that it is. So is that helpful? Of course it's helpful. Is it what's right in those leases and what your rights and responsibilities are as a landlord? It is. And your expenses will go up And so as they go up, that can either eat into your rents, or that's something where they start contributing towards. And so that's the more palatable way for the smaller tenants.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. So the next one,
Another question, also about leases. Does the type of lease depend on asset class? Ken is going into contract on a Class A office building.
So it does, for sure. And so in office buildings, you have full service gross leases, right? And the general idea is, if you think of an office building that has an interior lobby, an interior corridor, interior elevators, and interior bathrooms that everybody shares, you as the landlord are paying for all of that to be functional and operating. And then your billing, that's included in the rent that tenants pay. And so when you go into Class A office, that's how they operate those services and how they bill for them. And then this CAM reconciliation is a much bigger concept in Class A office, because tenants will try not to pay for those overages, or they'll try and limit the amount that they pay for those overages. And that is its own little cottage industry that I'm pretty familiar with, but that doesn't live in industrial. Like, there's no shared service that landlords need to account for in multi-tenant industrial.
I'm on mute. So question from Jason about, you had mentioned a lot of the amenities that you can add to make things nicer, like LVT and things like that. He says, are there certain amenities you can offer that will make the spaces more attractive, command a higher rent, and get lower vacancy, like electric car chargers, epoxy floors, landscaping, better lighting, things like that?
Yeah, all of it, no doubt.
As much as possible.
I have found who has the funds for large capital expenditures on a project, and it's usually people who are using other people's money. So syndicators and larger operators with friends and family money, or with a big fund that they've raised, they go and do those projects. Where I found most oftentimes smaller investors, you're already dealing with what it takes to come out of pocket to come up with buying one of these. You usually end up taking care of maintenance items and then improving the property. But where's that money coming from? So it's either coming from your pocket, it's coming from the operating account, and it takes time to build that up, or you just need to budget that up front, or your lender could give you like interest-only financing on capital expenditures that once you've then stabilized it, then you can turn that into permanent financing. That could be another way to finance improvements. I just have never gone that route. I generally have found, it's either you doing cosmetic work, or you've got a fund and you're doing something major, but I haven't gone the middle route yet. But that probably is possible and worth exploring.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then another question from Ken. When purchasing a property with existing tenants with 3 year remaining on the leases, have you had issues with financing?
No, it's funny. It's just a challenge in that education process. But the first time I was a 1099 independent contractor, that's what my tax return said. I'm a California kid who's buying in Texas, so I'm out of state. So community banks that can only lend to people in their community won't lend to me. And then I'm buying something that people don't know industrial very well, and they've got all these short-term leases. And so it was like, oh my God, where's the good news? What am I going to do here? And so I just went to every single bank with my here's my book. Here's what I'm doing. Here's how I'm doing it. Here's why I'm a good bet. And then I asked a couple loan broker friends. And what I found is, even with that background, I still found 6 or 7 people that said yes. And as soon as you got 6 or 7 people that say yes, you've got a marketplace. Now you can start to say, this guy will do that. What will you do? This guy will do that. Oh, your terms aren't that good anymore, where you're begging, borrowing, and pleading until you got something. And then once you got a couple of those, it's all of a sudden you feel like you have at least enough of a leveling of the playing field where you now know that it may be possible, and you may be able to improve upon the initial terms that you're seeing. So I'm very thankful that even with that it was still possible to make it happen.
Awesome.
I mean, I had $500,000 in exchange money, so I felt like the loan to value was 62%. So it's not like I had all of that and I was looking for 90% financing or 80% financing. Like, that's what I had to bring to the table that at least helped get over those first couple of humps and get the time of day.
Yeah. Makes sense. The next question is about tenant improvement budgets. Do you have a typical budget you try to shoot for these smaller warehouses?
Yeah, you guys ask good questions. That's a good one. I'd say in big buildings, you offer a TI budget. And in office leasing, it's very common to hear a TI budget dollars per square foot. I got $10 a square foot for tenant improvement allowance. You use it however you want. Or I've got $10 per square foot, but it can only be used within the four walls and only in things that I feel good about. And then in industrial, you generally have, show me what you're going to use it on. And oftentimes it's, take my floor plan and put an X on that wall and draw another rectangle where you want it to be. And I'll go bid it out and I'll tell you how much it's going to cost. And if I feel like it has value to me after you may be gone in 1 to 3 years, and I feel good about your credit and your security deposit is doubled, then maybe I will go do that. Or if you like, Mr. Tenant, I'll give you the first month free if you would like to do it on your own. And then you can do it how you like it. And if you want to do it today or you want to do it next year, that's your prerogative. But then I'm not stuck wondering if you want your door frame on the left side of the wall or the right side, or if you want a solid wood core door, or if you want, brass handles or any of that stuff. And in general, you just want to have it painted and clean and ready. And 9 out of 10 tenants don't want any changes because we're only talking about a few offices here. So sometimes you'll find an office is filled with boxes and storage. If they don't need it, then they just turn it into like small warehouse space. Or if they need one extra and they don't want to pay for it, some guy's got his desk out in the warehouse right next to the door that goes into the office. Or they have 2 people in one office instead of 1 person. So that's part of the benefit of the smaller spaces, is that you can lessen the amount of TIs you contribute and lessen the amount of brain cells that you contribute to contractors.
Yeah.
Great.
No offense. Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
Hey, I'm a broker, and half the time we all get trashed on these conversations, so it's okay. It's okay. The contractors can get trashed this time. That's okay.
Yes.
Question: how does a mom and pop take advantage of last mile delivery and e-commerce surge of warehouses?
Yeah, it's funny. It's like you just have to be willing to get in the game, I think. Yeah, because what is happening is companies are locating the products that we are all buying online closer and closer to population centers so that they need to drive them on trucks less. That's kind of just where the tide is going. So that would tell you these little buildings are usually in suburban areas that are pretty close to population centers. And so if you really wanted to take advantage of it, maybe you would try and find more that have dock doors. But in general, people who are taking advantage of that are the people that are buying 20 to 50,000 foot buildings that ordinarily, people didn't want to have anything to do with them. So in this small space, it's hard to know, kind of more. There's nothing you really need to do. It's kind of coming to you, and it's just if you want to be there and participate.
Very cool.
Yeah.
So the one question about listing your properties, obviously you're a broker. So what do you use? Do you use LoopNet? What other services do you use to get these properties out there?
Yeah, I pay for CoStar as a broker, so I use that. LoopNet is what the general public uses. That is CoStar's public-facing portal that generally has 80% of what's available on there, because brokers have to pay for their stuff to be on there, and not everyone wants to. And that's okay, because there's only so much you can pay CoStar. And then otherwise, Crexy is a new player that's like a mini CoStar that you've got to pay for. And I have found it's generally good for finding investment properties, but is less valuable for leasing. And so LoopNet gets it done 9 out of 10 times. I mean, me putting it on CoStar and LoopNet gets the phone to ring and gets me talking with people, but I have to have it on LoopNet and pay for some silver extra special super advertising that I'm not happy about, but it's just what it is.
Yep. Oh, that's great.
Have you always purchased existing properties, or have you ever developed or built?
That's the last frontier. So anything. It's interesting. There's a lot of value in ground up construction, but multi-tenant industrial is typically thought of as too expensive to build now, because you don't just have your 4 walls, your bathroom, and your office. You have a partition of each space. You have utilities to each space, both electricity. So you got 10 meters. You've got 10 conduit runs. You've got 10 water meters. You've got 10 drains. You've got 10 sinks. You've got 10 bathrooms. You've got 10 front doors. You've got 10 office pods. And so I feel like there's plenty of opportunity in like 100 to 500,000 population cities to find land and build in. And that's something that's in the back of my mind that it's worth exploring, but I haven't yet found the need to actually all right, stop what you're doing. Let's get out there and start looking at dirt in those cities, and let's start putting a pro forma together and have an architect lay it out and come to the market with the floor plan and say, I'm trying to build something like this, and here's the land. Contractors, you're back in the game. What's it going to cost to build this thing? And to start to go there. Yeah, it's interesting. I feel like most players with the track record have gone there. I haven't gone there yet.
Cool. So the next question, I think we've got 1, 2, 3 questions left. So I want to be cognizant of your time. I know we're at an hour and 11 minutes. So
we're going to make it. We got 5 minutes. We'll get through that.
Let's do it. So what competitive edge does a local investor have versus out-of-state investors?
That's a great one, right? I'm investing from a distance, and I know that can be more difficult because you can't see everything every time you want to see everything. Does everyone know me before I show up, right? Who is this guy? Where's he coming from? Are you going to get on an airplane, right? All that kind of stuff. But now with experience and with reaching out to brokers and writing a book and getting a podcast and getting your name out there, your name's all over the place. It doesn't mean they magically know me. And there's plenty of people that don't listen to any of that and don't care about it and don't value it. So that's one thing that is within your direct control, is your ability to package yourself and what you want and what you're trying to accomplish, to whether you're local or not, to give yourself an edge. And if you're local, you can still hear me okay?
Yep, gotcha.
Okay, perfect. I'm running out of juice on my earphones.
You're good.
If you're local, you can grab coffee with the guy you're trying to buy the building from. And maybe you can work seller financing, or that you can get a trust level and a relationship level going that you can't from out of state. So I think it's all about either is possible, and where are your strengths and what are you trying to do? And I think you can put in the sweat equity and package yourself in a way that can give you a shot no matter who you are or how you're trying to do it.
Awesome.
Question about financing. Is there Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac type of financing for industrial?
No, the government is not trying to incentivize buying industrial, which is, good or bad is up to you to decide. What I have found is helpful is once you have one, the same bank wants to lend you a second one. And a lot of these commercial banks that keep your paper, they're like a balance sheet lenders where they don't sell your loan because they're not Fannie Mae or Freddie. They have an incentive, they're incentivized to lend you more once they know you and they trust you and they believe you. You're a steward of their money. And so once they know you're a good steward, they would like to lend you on number 2, 3, and 4. And so although the downside is there's no government funding, the upside is that balance sheet lenders, there's a relationship there. My guy is Nick. Nick and I, we know each other's kids. We know what each other eats for breakfast. We feel very good about what we're doing. And we know the same CPAs and attorneys and like Fannie and Freddie, they don't know what you ate for breakfast and they don't care, right? But they have easy money for certain product types. So as much as that's not as cool as it could be, it's there's upside to it too.
Yeah, awesome. We are at 9:15. Do you have a cutoff at 9:15?
I said, we'll bust these last ones. The kids haven't busted in the door yet.
All right, there you go. So we'll go quick. Have you had any experience taking older, rundown, single-tenant buildings and repositioning them as small multi-tenant, with some capital expenditures?
Yeah, I love the idea, right? That's creativity. That's adding value. So I haven't. Like, I think buy a 20 and make it 4 5s or something like that. I haven't. Yeah. People are doing it. Phoenix investors, you guys can look up. They're doing it out of the Midwest and in the Midwest on 100,000 footers and 200,000 footers.
Wow.
And they're taking advantage of the e-commerce by doing that. But on the smaller scale, I haven't found that because you still need access. Everybody needs to have an entrance. Everybody needs to have a roll-up door. You now need to split the sprinklers into 4 and the utilities and anything that services the space. And usually buildings have a 0 lot line on the back or on the side, which would only give you 2 walls or 3 walls to then give everybody access to. Or oftentimes there's a front and there's a back. And so do you want the back half? No, I don't either. Well, who's going to take it? Someone that will pay less. So it may be possible that you can get a premium for the front and a discount for the back, or you can split up the space in a manner that can work with the site level characteristics. But that's there's a couple challenges there, no doubt.
Great.
One last question. Hopefully the headset's gonna hold it. So someone's saying, I'm juggling industrial syndications and industrial brokerage as well, but just starting out. Do you recommend scheduling time for both or just syndicating if deals come our way during brokerage? How many years of brokerage did you do before starting to syndicate? And do you recommend that amount of time?
This is Logan's question. I can tell. That's okay, Logan.
I wasn't actually, but I love it. It's a great question.
I'm totally joking with you. I haven't syndicated, right? So I've tried and I've just ended up doing with my own money.
Yeah.
And it's on one hand, you may feel it's a distraction on occasion, whether one is the distraction for the other and which one is your primary or not. And then another is when you're a steward of other people's money on a side hustle, that doesn't start with a good feeling. That starts with a challenge to overcome. So maybe it's not that. it's not a hobby, right? It's not something you don't care about or you're not going to be responsible with. But yeah, investing with other people's money, like I feel like that will cause you to need more infrastructure. Maybe think of like a bookkeeper or accountant or a CFO, or building up like a property management team or a leasing team. You can third party all of that. But I think the further you go up the chain, the more you'll need that. And so my plan is still to bark up that same tree, because I feel like it's still a worthy endeavor. But I feel like you just have to be sensitive to those concerns and have come up with real strategies for why you are doing as good a job as someone who does not have brokerage as their primary business. Or for example, can you be the buyer agent on your deal? Can you be the leasing guy on your deal with someone else's money, or is that a conflict of interest? Do you have to have a third party, another broker? God forbid you've got another broker who's your buyer broker and your leasing broker and your dispositions broker, and you're paying them all the fees. Like all that is aligning interests and removing conflicts and dealing with those. I think no doubt there's a way to do it. I just am aware that there are some things there to be sensitive to.
Sure.
Well, thank you so
Absolutely.
much, Justin. We have a few thank yous in the chat.
What's that?
We have a few thank yous in the chat. And
yeah, there's a thank you. There's a just bought a copy of your book. There's a thank you so much. So yeah, I think everybody got a ton of value out of this amazing interview. So I think this was a very in-depth interview that I think everybody here learned from. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you guys for putting this together. Yeah, it's not without having someone thinking it's important and trying to bring resources to the table to get that value out there for your people. So I think that's special, and I appreciate you guys.
Yeah, appreciate that. I am going to touch base with you on the book. So yeah, we got to chat about that. That's great.
Cool. Let's do it. We'll talk to you guys later.
Thanks, Justin.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.